Awesome. All right. Hey, everyone. The mission of ChangeNerd is to bring diversity of thought and empowerment to professionals who are focused on enterprise change. In service to this mission, we interview subject matter experts every week to talk about topics that matter. This week, we are interviewing Erin Eribarne, who is the co-founder and principal of HumanXP, a consulting firm that's helping businesses unlock value through team performance, culture, and leadership, and also customer experience capabilities. So Erin, thank you so much for taking time out your schedule to be with us today.
Yes, thank you for having me, and thank you for all the work you're doing with ChangeNerd.
Yeah, really, really appreciate it. So Erin, tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. So I'm actually kind of born in the human resources space. And when I became a human resource practitioner, I realized that human resources was less and less about the human every minute and every hour I was in that organization. And fortunately, that is changing and has changed somewhat. Yep. But that really led me to find the field of organizational development. And I got my master's from Benedictine. Yep. And met a lot of really, great former colleagues there. You are one of them.
Yep.
And also, while I was in Chicago, spent a lot of time in the healthcare industry. And, healthcare is a very unique industry because they sort of have the patient already at the center of everything that they do. Yep. So some of the work that we're trying to do in org development and leadership development was much easier to get across and much more clear in that type of environment where the purpose and mission was just really clear. And so I was there at a time where they were going through some pretty drastic M&A activity, some pretty drastic governmental regulations, and a talent shortage, so to speak. And so all three of those really allowed for a really awesome playground as an internal OD consultant to the healthcare space. So shortly after that, so I did that for about 4 years, and I decided to move back to Houston to be closer to my family, who's all in South Louisiana. Yeah. And Houston, the reason I picked Houston is because they were honestly, the closest city to home that was even hiring change managers at the time. Still to this day, there are many organizations who are not even using change management. We are behind the times. We're behind the times. So I got a chance to come and do more organizational change management in an IT strategy capacity when I moved to Houston. So I went from this really deep OD human resource experience to focusing my change management efforts with IT professionals and IT teams and CIOs, and coaching and advising senior levels in these types of organizations that have already been through a lot of technology change. Wow. Because in essence, many of our IT groups are the ones leading this change.
Yep.
So I got some really, really great experience and got to sort of dig really deep to the change management network in Houston. I was externally consulting for a small boutique consulting firm that recently got acquired by Accenture. Mm-hmm. And I also met my husband there. Awesome. And, both my husband and I realized that there was a need in the market for a cross-functional approach to how these IT projects were being handled. And many companies, and this is what we're here to talk about today, Ryan, are really tagging this and calling it digital transformation. Yep. And when we talk, and so I know we're going to get into this, and I might be jumping the gun a little bit here, but this need to look across functional silos, to look at what HR was doing in culture and learning and development, to look at what IT had learned from their DevOps and Agile implementation, to look at what the business strategy and planning side was learning about project and financial reporting, and take all of those areas and provide a real cross-functional, multidisciplinary approach to transformation. Yeah. And that wasn't being offered in the market. And my husband being really IT background and myself being really OD HR background, we sort of found that commonality. And we just this year launched our own services firm called HumanXP.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Erin, thank you so much for providing the background. So digital transformation, if you place it in Google, like there's millions of different types of definitions that pop up. Even if you look at some of the bigger firms, they tend to have varying definitions. What's your perspective? How would you define digital transformation?
So I like to keep things simple, even though I do talk a lot. So a simple way that I kind of think about digital transformation, it is a company's ability to create value based off of disruptive technology. And if we drill that down even further, there are really 4 areas of disruptive technology that are causing rapid change, not only to business, but to the way that we work and the way that we live.
Yep.
So I would describe those 4 areas as interconnectedness. People are connected to people. You and I are connected in a way that we would have never been connected before, as an example. Yep. And we are connected through data, and we are connected through technology, and we are connected through our relationships. Yep. And we are just one connection, yep. Right? And so what technology has allowed us to do is expand our interconnectedness to a level far greater than we could have ever imagined. And we see things like globalization and just magnifying what our friends in other countries are doing around some of the same stuff that we're doing here.
Yep.
We are all human, right? So definitely a disruptor for digital technology is interconnectedness, yep. The way we are connected by people to people and devices to devices. Yep. The other big thing is the amount of data.
Yep. Yep.
So another huge disruptor there, data volume and data transparency. We are now tracking data. And, I like to use the example of an oil rig, because, Houston is an oil and gas state, energy state. Many, many other things great about Houston. But, think about a widget out on a rig. Mm-hmm. The amount of data that these companies can collect from drilling a hole in the ground is absolutely incredible. And you think that is one specific rig, and we are talking hundreds and thousands of rigs out in our oceans. Yeah. And that person that's sitting back at Houston behind the computer, taking that one piece of data and making decisions off of it, is really what we mean when we talk about the availability of data and the transparency of data and the ability to make decisions off of that data. That is not something we had years ago.
Yeah.
So we are more connected and we have more data.
Yep.
The other 2 things are the things that really affect the roles and the way people work. And those 2 things are automation and artificial intelligence.
Yep.
So automation is taking that simple task and being able to automate it, to take the person out of it. And we think about this very simply from our assembly lines and manufacturing processes that we have today. Yep. We have been doing automation for years and years and generations. Our business is founded off of the Industrial Revolution, and we are still operating in much of a similar capacity. So we know how to automate. So what's happened recently is we've started to automate some of our back office functions and some of our what we might call less critical business tasks. And that has improved and enhanced, hopefully, some of you even on this call, streamline work a lot, right? And what we're going to see is that automation happening more and more and more throughout the business, even for things that are more critical. And I'll give you an example. Yeah. I saw it recently in a large energy client where they were automating their sales process, right? And what they were trying to do is keep the essence of the relationship and train their salespeople to go back to being relationship people, but automating all the back-end workflow. So much so that you eventually put that in the customer's hands, right? So you can go to a tool, click a button, and automatically get your price. Yep. And have the conversation with the salesperson and let them be an advisor to you more than just a person generating a price.
That's awesome.
Right? So a great example of how automation is impacting roles.
Yep.
So the last one that I mentioned is artificial intelligence, right? And artificial intelligence is the ability of a machine to sort of extend our capability. So it's not necessarily replacing what we can do. If you think of like a forklift has a mechanical arm, right? And that mechanical arm is an extension of its ability. AI is an extension of our brain capability. So just like we can go to Google and ask it a question and get a very immediate answer and use that answer to inform something we're working on or thinking about, AI does that to the nth degree, right? So we run an algorithm, we develop an algorithm, we run it on this data, and over time it continues to learn, it continues to improve, and it continues to help us do our jobs better.
Awesome.
So digital transformation, you know, just to kind of recap, it's really taking advantage and creating value out of those four disruptors.
Yeah, yeah.
Facebook, to the nth degree, has done this on interconnectedness. Mm-hmm. They have capitalized on their ability to connect people, right? A whole new market that was not even in existence just a little over 10 years ago.
Yeah. So Erin, let's talk about leadership, agility, and trust. What makes those three, you know, it sounds a little academic, but like what makes those three variables important when we think about digital transformation?
So digital transformation is challenging, right? These companies born in Silicon Valley, they are starting with a different mindset. They are starting with an agile mindset. They know that their customer is fluid, their customer demands are fluid, therefore their strategy and the way they operate has to be fluid. So why are specifically these three things? We talk about trust, and we talk about agility, and we talk about leadership. Trust is really empowerment of people to do their jobs without fear of retribution. So if my boss trusts me to make a decision, what might need to be in place in order for that to happen? I'm going to have to know the boundaries of where I work and where I play. I have to know my general responsibilities. There's some authority items that come into play with trust, and we can, you know, tease those out further. But in general, people are burnt out because they don't have trust. They don't have psychological safety in the workplace. So trust is one piece, right? I need that empowerment to make the decision. Agility. Ability to change quickly, and to adapt quickly, right? I think of an example, you know, let's say a food chain says, I want to implement 5 new menu items across the US in a week. Think about the amount of marketing, operations, logistics that would have to go into place in order for that organization, who maybe just got some new data that said, wow, we need to add X offering to our menu. How do you rally a whole organization and team in order to make that happen? That is being agile. And those agile actions, right, you're taking that live data and being able to make sense and make action out of it. So without the trust, every decision is going to get questioned. Every move is going to get questioned. People will not act honestly. They will not act with empowerment. Because of all the reasons that we know. I mean, politics is a real thing. Politics is a real thing. So, you know, when you think about leadership to me is the enabler. It is the enabler or the roadblock between agility and trust. They are the linchpin. Your leaders are the linchpin. And I do not see that changing in a new type of organization or operating model. Leaders will still be critical to communicating and managing that strategy.
So Erin, in your experience, have you seen this done successfully? Have you seen digital transformation, you know, merge with, you know, these three elements? Have you seen that come to life? And can you tell us about that?
So Yeah, absolutely. So I will give comfort, hopefully, to everyone on the phone to say, digital transformation, by the way, is still a new term. Okay. So just like we are talking here about organizations having to adapt faster and faster than ever before, we as change management practitioners, as organizational development practitioners, as business leaders, as business strategists, are having to think and change our mindsets faster and faster than ever before. So it is only recently that these digital transformation programs have sort of formed and been more comprehensive across the organization, and that some of the learnings are starting to come out from that. Yeah. So I say all that to say, when we really think about what happens when we integrate trust and we integrate agility and leadership, what does that look like? For me, it looks like in the center, a customer-centric purpose. Yeah. So a customer-centric, customer-first strategy. And you know, I've had back and forth conversations with other members of my team about specifically that, and maybe again, if there's time at the end, we tease that out a little bit more. But you know, I think back to my healthcare experience. That is what drove the ease of every initiative and every planning conversation and every crucial conversation, and gave us the right to talk about psychological safety in the workplace. And it just opened all the doors because the purpose and the center was so clear. You know, not as easy with oil and gas companies. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's still, what does our customer want and how can we respond to that? So we are rebuilding the operating model with the customer at the core. Yeah. Not the way it is today. Not the way it is today. Yeah. So, and when we do that, we really got to think about the entire operating parameters of the business being different. Yeah. So we think about at the very top, it starts with how we do strategic planning. So we set our new mission and purpose. We reset to a customer experience strategy across the organization. We do strategy different. We organize our leaders and teams different. We manage our employee experience different. We track decisions and decision enablement. That's a function that is managing how our KPIs and metrics and visibility and transparency is being used throughout the organization. And lastly, we use technology to enable that customer-centric strategy.
That's awesome.
So all of those really coming together to kind of surround this new idea of, let's take a customer-centric approach to operating. And that's really going to help us drive some of the speed that we need.
Yeah. So Erin, this is really cool because, like, as you were speaking, questions are like popping in my head.
Oh my goodness, great.
Yeah. So how long does it take typically for an organization to mature to the point where they're able to implement these digital transformation efforts and apply the human element? They're applying, you know, leadership, agility, and trust, because I mean, it's no secret. Organizations that change, right? Organizations that have experience with change tend to change more successfully because they've made the mistakes and things of that nature. But just from your experience, like, what is that? What's that timeline? Is it 3 years? Is it 5 years? Just in your experience, what do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question. I probably would have my most recent client, I laugh, they would say until the money runs out.
Yeah.
But you know, digital transformation, the second word is transformation. Yeah. And, you know, if we are talking about implementing a few customer-centric products, that's different than if we're talking about really a full-scale operating model transformation. And just like with any change management exercise, you know, we are going to go through the process of awareness and desire and knowledge, right? And that, to take an individual or an organization through that level of change, requires significant time and investment. And so what are we starting to see companies do today? Because they are making moves. They are making moves in planning for, you know, this level of change. And, you know, I think the reality is they recognize it is going to be a significant investment in time and resources. So they are starting to try to test some of these concepts and to test some of these ideas. Maybe it's agile PMOs. Maybe they're starting to work that into their way of planning. Maybe they're starting to bring change managers on every project, or standing change management up as a function. Well, what's happening is they're meeting the same resistance. They're still, those change managers, as we know, I'm sure there's some on the phone, are still dealing with the same reality. My executives' incentives aren't aligned. No one's tracking the ROI on the project. No one's managing the senior leader's bad behavior. These are all still real problems. So to answer your question specifically, I think 3 years would be a minimum undertaking. And it's not even a time, it's really a mindset change. And so once you start and open and accepting to that, you just accept that we are on a new journey to become a new type of organization. And that in itself is just going to be our journey.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And then if you are watching this episode and they're listening to this conversation, Erin, what's the framework, right? If there's an organization that's just getting started, what's the mindset shifts or guiding principles that you would recommend to an organization that's at the beginning of their digital transformation journey?
Yes, that's a great question. So, I think because I have a background in learning and development, I am always one that says there is no harm with starting with education. So if you're here as the VP of HR tuning in, or if you're here as a practitioner of change, find the champion in your organization that understands some of these concepts, understands, possibly has faced or failed with some of these digital transformation challenges, and bring them and enroll them in your mission.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. So champions and education. And I think both of those are easy places to start. I would say the other maybe really practical suggestion for some folks out there would be to take a change impact assessment. Many folks are already doing change impact assessments for projects, and add some additional criteria that really digs into how is this just going to impact the roles?
Yeah.
Well, now Sally is going to do a different job tomorrow, but let's tease that out even further. And really, if we just spent a little bit more time on some of these digital transformation programs, setting up and discussing the process and role and tool impacts to a much more detailed level, these things are going to start to fall out. I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
Recently helped a company implement a new customer portal for their business customers. And it was really just an upgrade of their old portal. But the reality is the internal team was going to be using this tool in an entirely new way. What ultimately happened at the end of it was 3 internal folks on the customer support team became technical support folks. These are 3 folks who were going from answering the phones and responding to customer inquiries to now being basically an administrator for this support system, right? You had the business folks who are now trained to use a customer portal. So when they would get calls from their customer, they were able to go in first stop and use that exact same system.
Yeah.
You had a leader with a new set of dashboards and tools to manage the team and manage the workflow. So how does that data then get pulled up into executive incentives and KPIs,
Yeah.
right? So again, the tactical feedback, really tease out your change impact assessments. If you're not doing those, start those and start making those as robust as possible. Use your organizational risks and already the tools that you have in place to elevate some of those conversations.
Yeah, awesome. So we have some questions from the community. So one,
put me on the spot.
Yeah. So let's see. One question is coming from Steve. Given the demands of digital transformation and all the work involved, how do you see the skill set of change management practitioners evolving?
That is an excellent question, Steve. Thank you. You know, this is where I think it's great. I think our toolkit and tool set is much the same.
Yeah.
It is much the same. I think our ability to be facilitators and influencers increases significantly. So we are the champions of this initiative. We are now organizational champions. We are not project champions. We are not HR champions. I see organizational development and change management is needing to be a COE of an organization, right? So that is an elevated function. And therefore, we are going to have to up our skills. We are going to have to become a little bit more business savvy. We're going to have to become a little bit more digital and technology savvy.
Yep.
But most importantly, we are going to be needed for our authenticity and for our facilitation and our ability to align folks, which is really no different than what we've done today.
Yeah, yeah.
So I would say brush up on some of your skills and your terminology.
Yep.
But don't be too worried. Don't be too worried. We are needed. We are needed.
Yeah. So as you're speaking, Steve is like typing. He's sending me questions right now. Let's see. I'm going to see if I can transition him into the conversation. Steve, can you hear us?
Steve, you're on live.
Yeah. Let's see. Unmute.
See. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now, Steve. Go ahead. You have a question?
Hi, Steve.
Hi, Erin. Good to talk to you again.
Yeah, you too.
Right,
Welcome.
Erin and I met yesterday briefly on the phone, so good to be speaking with you. Yeah, I think you've kind of touched on this in the last question, but I was just curious where you thought change managers will be best placed in the organization to support digital transformation initiatives in the future.
Yeah, again, it's a great question because we're all over the place now. We have titles all over the place. We do everything from learning and development to workshop facilitation to leadership coaching to strategy work and more strategy work over time. So, you know, it's funny, Brian and I even talked a little bit about this yesterday. These organizations, many of them trying to spin up innovation functions or, you know, they're trying out some of these principles, but doing it in a much safer environment where risk is maybe tolerated a little bit more. And they're working really well. Why? Because there's a lot less bureaucracy in those new startup innovation organizations. But what's happening is when they're trying to bring that back into the business, no surprise. Hey there.
Hello.
There you are on camera. So no surprise, they're getting stuck back with these, you know, the same legacy operating models that they've always had to deal with.
Yeah.
And this is really where organizational development as a COE, business transformation as a COE can really help this continuous planning of the overall impact of change on an organization. Because I hate to tell all of you out there who are really sweating the amount of change you're feeling now, it is only going to get much more significant. And by golly, people are burnt out. You know, they don't seem to be burnt out at Google. They seem to be happy and having coffee and sitting on sofas, right?
Yeah.
We have got to bring that to our organizations because there are too many people working too hard in these organizations to not have some of that, to feel some of that same freedom. And technology will allow it. And I think OD and change management is the enabler and the fuel for that type of work.
Yeah, yeah. Steve, does that answer your question?
Yeah, great answer.
Awesome. And then,
Thank you, Steve.
And then Erin, the other question comes from a company I spoke to earlier this morning as well. So what's happening in some companies is that like they're moving their change management resources into the PMO, right? You know, maybe a company once had a change management COE and they're now consolidating. And so what you end up with is this hybrid PMO is what I'm phrasing it as, where you have, you know, you may have your traditional project manager, you may have some finance people in there, tracking tracking the portfolio management piece of it. You have some IT people, some communications people, traditional change management people. Like, have you seen, or are you working with companies that are implementing, digital transformation with a hybrid PMO? And if so, how are they making that work?
Yes, in fact, the organization that I'm working, one of the organizations that I'm working with now, which is a large global cross-industry, but mostly manufacturing organization, is taking that on. And I can tell you, it seems to be working pretty well. And this is really where I got the solution of, let's do a deeper change impact assessment. And the other kind of thing that I'm finding working really well is let's do agile process improvement and agile process optimization.
Yeah.
So these companies are still going through M&A activity. They are still dealing with regulation and legal changes on the regular.
Yeah.
So they have very little room and space for even dealing with these new ideas of digital transformation and these sorts of concepts. The PMO has a unique advantage because they come in pretty early in the strategic planning process, and they are helping to plan resources and advise on strategies and timelines, and helping kind of hold that financial and reporting mechanism together as the project goes along.
Yep.
So I think they have a unique advantage to position change management there. But let's not confuse that with the organizational development work that still needs to be done at the senior level about what is our strategic planning process? What is our strategy at its core? What is our mission? How do we execute on that?
Yeah.
So it's a great place to start, and I think it works really well, especially in organizations who are starting to take on more an agile first culture.
Yeah, awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So Erin, we talked about a number of things. When it comes to integrating leadership, agility, trust into digital transformation, what's the one thing you would want someone to take away from our conversation today?
Hands down, Brian, the takeaway is this is a cross-functional, multidisciplinary approach.
Yes.
If companies are going to be successful in transforming, they have to recognize that people are people, and it is going to take all kinds, to say it simply. The CIO, the head of the IT organization, they have been dealing with this type of change for a very long time. They've been struggling with trying to help implement these projects for the last 10 to 15 years in most cases, and dealing with their own sets of challenges. HR has been struggling to implement their culture and learning and development. Marketing is now trying to implement their customer experience strategies with their own challenges. Let's bring these leaders to the table. Let's share those learning and get them to agree, get them all to be champions of the fact that we need to change from inside out and transform from the core. It will take a breakdown of these silos to get it done.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So Erin, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to have this conversation today. And for those of you on the call, thanks for being here and engaging with us. This concludes the webcast.
Thanks, Brian. Bye, everyone.